In the small village of Umuahia, nestled between the thick forests of eastern Nigeria, tales traveled faster than the harmattan wind. Among these stories, one stood out, that of a girl named Edeabi, born with a head unusually large for her body. From the day of her birth, whispers surrounded her family's compound. Some called her an omen, others a curse. Her mother, Mama Nena, said the gods had given her a different kind of beauty, one that would be revealed in time. But time had not been kind. At 17, Edeabi still walked with her head lowered, not from shame, but from years of mockery. Her skin was a flawless deep brown, her eyes carried the weight of wisdom beyond her years, but no one noticed, all they saw was her head. The village children laughed and ran when she passed, the women pitied her, and the men turned away in disgust, all but one, Prince Obinna. The young prince of Umuahia was not a kind man. Raised with silk and surrounded by sycophants, he found amusement in others' pain. He was tall, with the charm of a snake and a heart to match. When he saw Edeabi at the stream one morning, fetching water with quiet grace, he smirked and called out for all to hear. Aya! Ada with the head of an elephant, how do you sleep without rolling off the mat? The crowd burst into laughter. Edeabi froze. Her clay pot slipped from her hands and shattered at her feet. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. Instead, she turned, picked up the broken pieces, and walked back into the forest path that led to her mother's hut. That night, the sky roared with thunder, though the rain never came. The elders spoke of strange happenings, goats disappearing, crops wilting overnight. But the strangest of all was that Prince Obinna began to have dreams of Edeabi standing over him, her head larger than the moon, her eyes glowing with fire. He laughed it off, blaming stale palm wine. But each night, the dream returned, clearer, darker. In the last one, she whispered a single word, *C. The prince awoke gasping, drenched in sweat. His mother, the queen, called for the village priest. When the priest arrived, he examined Obinna's eyes and murmured something the prince didn't understand. Then, in front of everyone, the priest declared, "Your vision will now be your punishment." The prince scoffed. But by midday, everything began to blur. Shapes dissolved. Faces melted into shadows. He rubbed his eyes, but the world remained a smear of light and darkness. The prince, who had mocked Edeabi for the shape of her head, was now going blind. And deep in the village, Edeabi sat outside her hut, humming softly. Her mother asked what she was thinking about. Edeabi only smiled and said, "The gods never forget what others choose to laugh at." The palace was thrown into panic. By the next morning, Prince Obinna could barely see the outlines of his breakfast. The healers came with roots and oils, chanting incantations passed down for generations. Nothing worked. The blindness was creeping, hungry, devouring his world inch by inch. The queen wept behind closed doors. The king, a stern man with little patience, summoned the village elders. They sat under the sacred Udala tree, stroking their grey beards and murmuring about justice, curses, and the wrath of the ancestors. Meanwhile, Edeabi continued her life in quiet dignity. She no longer fetched water at the main stream, instead, she went deeper into the forest where birds whispered secrets and shadows listened. Those who passed her mother's compound noticed a strange peace lingering in the air. Some said the trees bent toward her when she walked. Others swore they saw her speaking to the wind. But none dared approach her. Except one, Nduka, the village blacksmith's son. He had always looked at Edeabi differently. He remembered when they were children, how she would draw shapes in the sand and tell stories of stars she had never seen but somehow knew. When he heard about what had happened to the prince, he didn't rejoice like the others. Instead, he came to her hut, carrying a gift, a mirror carved from the bark of an iroko tree. He handed it to her with trembling hands. I don't know what they see when they look at you, Nduka said quietly, but this is what I see, a girl of strength, of depth, of something far beyond all of us. Adaobi took the mirror and stared at her reflection. For a moment, her eyes watered, not from pain, but from something unfamiliar, gratitude. She didn't speak. She only nodded. Back at the palace, the prince raged like a trapped animal. He ordered the guards to find Adaobi and drag her before him. It is her, he snarled, his eyes now completely pale. She's cursed me. But the guards refused. Superstition gripped the village like a vice. No one dared touch her, not even the bravest warrior. Instead, the elders gathered once more and called for Adaobi herself. And to everyone's surprise, she came. She arrived at the palace barefoot, dressed in a simple wrapper, her head held high. The hall fell silent as her footsteps echoed like thunder. The prince, now blind, could feel her presence before he heard her voice. You mocked what the gods gave me, she said gently. You used laughter as a weapon. Now the same gods have taken your sight, not to punish, but to teach. The prince groaned. Then teach me. Heal me. But Adaobi shook her head. You can only be healed by the eyes of your soul. Until you learn to see, you will remain blind. And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving behind a prince in darkness, and a palace that finally understood the weight of cruelty. Weeks passed. The villagers spoke in hushed tones, not of Adaobi's curse, but of her strength. No one dared call her names anymore. Children watched her with wide eyes, unsure if she was spirit or woman. The truth was, Adaobi was neither cursed nor mystical, she was simply awake. And finally, the world was waking up to her light. But the prince remained in darkness. He sat in his chambers, refusing food, lashing out at anyone who entered. His dreams returned, but now they were different. Instead of Adaobi towering above him, she sat by a quiet river, singing softly, her head resting gently on her knees. Her voice was calm, sorrowful. And always, before he woke, she would say the same word, see. He couldn't understand it. One evening, as the moon bled red into the horizon, the king himself came to his son's room. Obinna, sunken-eyed and broken, reached toward the voice of his father. Why did the gods take my sight? He whispered. The king sat silently for a moment, then said, because they could not reach your heart through your eyes. Obinna wept. For the first time, he did not rage or curse. He wept, not for his blindness, but for the boy he had become. The cruelty. The pride. The laughter. All of it crashed around him like a broken gourd. The next day, he did something no prince had ever done. He walked, barefoot and guided, to Adaobi's hut. The village stood still as they watched the blind prince stumble through red earth and thorny paths. When he reached her gate, he called her name, not with arrogance, but with humility. Adaobi, please. She stepped out slowly, surprised. Her mother watched from the doorway, saying nothing. The prince dropped to his knees. I mocked you. I made others laugh at your pain. I cannot undo what I've done, but I ask you, not for healing, but for forgiveness. Adaobi looked at him, truly looked. Not with vengeance, but with the weight of someone who had carried pain for far too long. Why now? She asked. Because I finally see you, he said, lifting his head though he could not see. Not your head. Not your name. You. A silence hung between them. The wind whispered through the trees like ancient spirits waiting. Then Adaobi reached out, took his hand, and helped him up. You were blind long before the gods took your eyes, she said softly. But now, maybe, you're beginning to see. And as they stood there, a prince once proud and a girl once mocked, the villagers began to gather, drawn by something deeper than curiosity. They saw a moment of true humility. A prince made small. A woman made powerful. A story rewritten. But not yet finished. Because something was about to happen, something that would change them all. The day after the prince knelt before Adeobi, Umuahia changed. It wasn't sudden. No drumbeats, no thunder. Just a quiet shift, like the scent of rain before the clouds gather. Villagers who once snickered now bowed their heads in respect when Adeobi passed. Mothers warned their children not to mock what they did not understand. And the elders? They called a council meeting, not to discuss curses, but change. For the first time in generations, the palace gates opened not just for nobles, but for every voice in the village. And at the center of it all stood the blind prince and the girl with the abnormal head, side by side. The elders requested Adeobi speak. She stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "You called me cursed," she said, her eyes sweeping the crowd. "But the only curse I ever carried was the weight of your laughter. You feared what you didn't know. You turned difference into disgrace. But look where that brought us." She turned to the prince, then back to the people. "You all saw my head, but none of you saw me. I forgave the prince not because he begged, but because he changed. Not with words, but with seeing." The chief elder stood. "What should we do, Adeobi?" She hesitated. Then she said, "Start teaching the children the stories of all kinds of beauty. Stop mocking the strange. And most of all, stop waiting for the gods to punish what you should correct." A hush fell over the square. Then, slowly, applause. First from the women. Then the youth. And finally, even the king clapped, nodding with tears in his eyes. That night, something miraculous happened. Prince Obinna lay in his bed, dreaming again. But this time, the dream was warm. Adeobi sat beside him in a field of golden grass. She smiled, not as a ghost or a judge, but as a friend. And then she leaned forward and said, "You've finally seen." He awoke with a gasp. And for the first time in weeks, he saw. Not fully, his sight was dim, as if seen through mist. But he could see the outlines of his room. The candlelight flickered in the corner. A bird fluttered past the window. It wasn't perfect. But it was enough. When the village heard, they didn't celebrate wildly. They didn't claim it as a miracle. Instead, they said it was justice, not from the gods, but from the soul. Prince Obinna never became the same man. He walked with a stick, but also with wisdom. He built a school for children like Adeobi, those born different, those misunderstood. And he asked her to lead it. Adeobi never married him. But they remained partners, not in romance, but in rebuilding. And so, the girl once mocked for her big head became the voice of reason, and the prince, once blind in soul and sight, became her witness. The moral: true sight isn't in the eyes. It's in the heart that chooses to understand before it judges.